willkommen bei einer neuen Ausgabe von Schieders Melange, und ich werde gleich auf Englisch wechseln, denn mein Gast und das Thema heute sind die schwedischen Wahlen. So, welcome Ilan. Eine De Basso is a member of the European Parliament, but Swedish, as we can see also you have the symbol of the Swedish Workers' Party also on your jacket. And the Swedish parliamentary election just recently, of course, gave us a lot of questions, so I thought it's good to discuss with somebody, and I think probably with you is the best because you are in the European Parliament but had a past in the Swedish Parliament, and you also have a political responsibility also in one of the Swedish provinces for the party, so you're deeply involved also in these political decisions. So let's maybe start, because for us was quite weird, because Swedish Social Democratic Party made an extremely good result, more than 30%. Magdalena Andersson, the Prime Minister, which just recently took over, she is very, also very, not only very sympathetic, but also very popular in the public opinion. So everything went well out of the position from the Social Democratic, but at the end the right bloc, let's say, have some seats in front. So maybe you can discuss a little bit this how you see the result.
Well, thank you first of all for inviting me to this discussion and to meet you. Well, the result was we had one goal with this election. That was, of course, to increase our support for our party. We have never actually entered an election in Sweden with the idea of going into a certain bloc. We do it as an independent party. We do it by our own power and our support. And we always also tell our citizens that it's up to them to decide how the government can be formed. So for that case, for that reason, we never go to run for elections saying that we belong to a certain bloc. We realize, of course, that the climate or the terrain of the Swedish politics is a little bit complicated nowadays. We do have a lot of small parties, and you never know in what direction they will go. So from our point of view, the result should be considered to be positive, of course, since we increased our support. We had 100 mandates in the Swedish Parliament, the last elections. Now we have 107 mandates, which gives us a strong position. But what had happened during the last 2-3 years is that the right-wing nationalistic populistic bloc was formed with the support of the conservatives and the Christ Democrats, which hadn't happened before. We hadn't this situation before. We used to have a conservative alliance consisting of 4 parties, but the new thing was that the conservatives also included the
extreme.
Yes, the
maybe we have to say the names, because the names are quite tricky when we look at it. The moderate party is what we would say the conservative party.
They are the traditional conservative.
Then you have Christian Democrats. I think this is clear by the name.
Yes, it is, but I don't think that the Swedish Christian Democratic Party can be compared to the Europeans, because they are far more to the right than they are usually out on the continent. So I would say that ideologically the Christ Democrats in Sweden are much closer to the nationalistic party than the, for example, traditional conservative.
And then we have, so the moderate party ended up with 19%.
Yes.
And then we have the Sweden Democrats, which is sounds very nice, but it means that this is the extreme right party.
That's the extreme right.
Nationalistic.
Well, I mean, checking their roots, it was founded by a former Nazi supporter, and there is no doubt that their roots, both historical and political roots, are from they are established from group that is very obviously far on the right, and they have Nazi-fascistic roots. Yes.
So they can, let's say, compared with the FPÖ in Austria, they can be compared with AfD in Germany, or with Mrs. Meloni.
Yes,
they are, or Mrs. Le Pen.
I mean, it is not what I am saying. I'm not trying to put my own values on what they are or not. But objectively, we can say that it was founded by people in the racist and fascist field movement. They were. Of course, even if you ask a fascist today whether they are fascists or not, they will deny it. So, but the thing is, what kind of politics do they represent? And looking on that field, you would definitely categorize them as one of the far-right extreme parties in Europe.
But they ended up with 20%, which is because, as I understood and I read in the newspapers, is usually all the democratic parties, so the Social Democrats, but also the moderates, said we will not make any coalition or political agreement with these Sweden Democrats right wing. But this time it was different because the moderate party said we want to go to power and we will even accept that the Sweden Democrats will help us to go to power and make a deal with them. And in this moment also they overtook them. So the Sweden Democrats are now stronger than the moderates. Even.
Yes, they are. They are. And this was the maybe most astonishing phenomenon in this election. But at the same time, I would say that there were two liberal conservative fields during the last years. You have one part of it pushing for a new bloc with the Sweden Democrats, like it is now, and you have traditional liberals that said if you ever try to include them in your bloc or your alliance, you will sooner or later pay a very high price for it. And this price is probably that they will grow and be bigger than you are. And I think that the moderate, the conservatives in Sweden had a self-picture that would never happen. And their idea was in some way to try to assimilate this group, this party, having the same agenda, having the same language, has the same rhetoric in the elections, which actually opened up for them and they became legitimate partners in the elections, and in a way that they weren't, because the last leaders on the conservatives, for the moderates for example, they have always said that we will never cooperate and have anything to do with them. But this shift happened 2-3 years ago, which was initiated by the Christian Democrats. It was not from the moderates.
Okay.
The Christian Democrats opened this door, and they were the first party to chosen this path, and the moderate, the conservatives followed them. And the third step was when the liberal left the agreement that we had with them and with the Center Party after the elections of 2018, where they suddenly shifted bloc also. So the liberals are also in the same bloc as the Sweden Democrats now.
So they also went over in this bloc.
Yeah.
But this means we are now in a situation where probably we will have a right-wing government in Sweden.
Yes.
Which is not only a conservative one, but will be also with extreme right ministers.
We don't know until this point whether they will be a part of the government or not, but we elected the new chairman of the parliament yesterday, which was a representative from the conservatives, which was quite expected. It is beyond what is the tradition in Sweden, because usually it should be the biggest party in that bloc. But I think that the Sweden Democrats are thinking in a tactical way and saying that, well, this is, of course, a chair which is more of a symbolic character. But on the other hand, they have made sure that half of the committees, they will have the chairs in these committees so far. But we don't know how the the government will be forming, then which party that will be included in this government. We don't know it yet.
And maybe we can maybe just also to explain, because there were also provincial and city elections, so everything was elected in Sweden, let's say.
On the same day.
In the same day, which is also very unique.
Yeah.
But also there, Social Democrats did quite well in getting mayors and, let's say, taking responsibility for the big cities in Sweden.
Yes, I think this might be a little bit confusing for people that are interested in Swedish politics, that the phenomenon is actually the fact that we grew and we had a strong support in Stockholm, in Gothenburg, in Malmö, all the biggest cities. We had a good result, and that gives us a better opportunity now to have to form governments in the regions and many of the municipalities. Of course, the negotiations are still going on, and we don't know what will be the outcome of them. And there also you have the same situation, and there are different traditions from region to region and how they consider the cooperation with the Sweden Democrats. So we are not sure. So far, I know at least two mid-sized municipalities in Sweden that the Liberals shifted from the progressive bloc to the right-wing extreme bloc, both in Södertälje, which is south of Stockholm, and Norrköping, quite close. Yes. So there we have a shift in power where, due to the Liberals that shifted the bloc. So we will wait and see. But our position, I would claim that it is stronger than it was in 2018 now. Yeah.
But this means also, just to make this point, that Magdalena Andersson, which is the leader of the Swedish Social Democratic Party, former finance minister, then prime minister, she will remain in the seat and try, of course, to be a strong voice for a social democratic policy in Sweden, as also she got additional support in this election. Maybe for those which are watching us, she has also some connections with Austria, because she studied in Vienna at the IHS, the Institute for Higher Studies. There is always this traditional linkage between Austrian and Swedish Social Democratic, also on the parties on this level. But to come back maybe to because people are very worried now what will happen with politics. We're looking also at the Italian electoral result, which I think the difference between Italy and Sweden is, in Sweden, Social Democrats did extremely well. In Italy, also Social Democrats did not do so well and were splitted and so on. But when we have now this center-right, extreme-right government, whoever will be sitting in the minister posts, what will be the politics? What were their, let's say, why they were elected by the people? Why people voted for them? Was it anti-foreigners?
Well, I wouldn't...
Anti-Europe?
Well, I mean, generally speaking, about the situation of the social democratic movement in Europe, there are quite important phenomena that we have to be aware of. The gaps between social economic groups in society, and it's quite obvious that the inequality has been growing during the 20-30 last years. You have a gap between the biggest cities and the countrysides. You have a gender gap between men and women, how they vote. So there are many important phenomena that we have to be aware of. But what we could expect from Sweden is, of course, and we had exactly the same situation. There is obviously a gap on these fields, and it's also a gap between the generation, where the youngest groups of voters were more supporters of the right-wing conservative bloc than the progressive parties, which might be a little bit astonishing, but at the same time we have to be self-critics and think about what was the reason behind it. But checking on the elderly people, they are more on the progressive side, especially women. So there are some phenomena that we have to be aware of. And I think that this government, of course, we have also mentioned the fact that the Sweden Democrats are the biggest party in this coalition. And of course, it would be very naive of the conservatives to think that they will get something for free. No, because now they have supporters, and those supporters are expecting them to deliver a result out of what they have promised. And I would say that if they fulfill these promises, there will not be that much money left in the Swedish economy to live up to these promises. But we will, as an opposition now, we will check them. We will, of course, follow up what the promises they gave people, because it was obviously populistic promises. And this government, however it will be formed, it is SD-supported government. It is their government. They cannot say that those are the conservatives, we are out of the government. No, this government is entering because of their active support of it. And the conservatives can never deny how related they are to this power and this government. So
but this leads to, I think, an interesting point, because with also what we discuss here in the European Parliament is that Manfred Weber, before the Italian election, was also giving strong support to Berlusconi and the right wing in Italy. So how do you see this, the conservative? Because I have the feeling that the traditional conservatives are partly going away from the old path, which was, let's say, of course, conservative politics on the side of big industries and, let's say, not so much in favor of social state and social security, but in generally pro-European and also willing in the democracy to find compromises. And now they are more and more slipping away to the extreme right side, to the populist side.
yeah.
And not a serious ally for building up a fair European idea, for example.
I think that the conservatives and the neoliberals in Europe generally, I think they have given up their ideas. It's quite obvious that they have done it. And they're giving up because there is no common movement among the conservatives and neoliberals that really believes that they have the answers for the future as conservatives. So what they think, their analysis, my opinion is that their analysis is that, well, the main supporter of these nationalistic and populistic movements, they might be their own voters. So for that reason, they are trying to assimilate them, to get closer to them and to take over their agenda, and to absorb them as both as movement but also as voters. But obviously they have failed. They have failed not only in Sweden, in other parts of Europe. And this was what I was talking about earlier, that the group of liberals in Sweden who warned about this shift, saying that you can never control them, you can never absorb them or assimilate them. What will be the effect of it is that they will grow bigger and bigger. To the end, they will swallow you, and not you are not able to swallow them. So my opinion, there is no neoliberal ideas left for Europe. For that reason, I think that this field will be open for us as social democrats now to go on an offensive line, and to attack them, and to give our people, our citizens in Europe, in our different member states, concrete alternative to populistic movements. But in my opinion, the conservatives and neoliberals, they have given up the struggle.
No, I agree completely. I think in Italy it's perfect to see. You know, first it was Berlusconi.
Yeah.
Then he tried to swallow Salvini, but at the end he was eaten up by Salvini, and now Salvini was eaten up by Meloni. So I can see, even we could say it in Austria, we also see how it is ending up, because if conservative is turning in and going into coalition with the populist extreme movements, it's ending up in chaos and in corruption. No doubt. In Italy it was corruption, in Austria huge corruption. So I'm not sure if also in Sweden how long this government might last. We will see. It's anyway, opposition has to make pressure anyway. Yeah. But on the other hand, what we see is that for the everyday problems of the people, there is no solutions. No? Like nowadays, I don't know how it's in Sweden. There is the rise of the prices. There's the explosion of energy prices. The winter is coming, and even September is already quite cold and rainy everywhere. So people have the fear how we can pay for heating, for have a warm home. Did they have a solution, the extreme right party?
Maybe in theory they might have the solution, but to the end, when you govern...
But in theory you cannot heat your home.
No, you cannot solve a concrete problem by that. What I'm saying is that the reality will catch them. It will catch them. I mean, if you put a price on all the promises that they represented in the elections, we don't have these monies to cover all this kind of costs, and the priorities that is ahead of them will be very hard for them to do that, and they are not used to govern at the same time. They have not the experiences. I would say that neither the conservative parties has this, even though the leader of the Conservative Party, Ulf Kristersson, has been a minister earlier. His staff and the people around them, they lack experience. Of course, I wouldn't say that, well, they will fail automatically, no. But the cost and the price they will have paid for it, because the kind of promises that they went to elections on are not realistic, and they will not be able to live up to them. And it's obvious, even in the first 2 weeks after the elections, they have already started to say to people, well, you have to wait a little bit longer, even though we told you the 1st of November we will have a subsidy program for the energy sector. We don't know whether it will be realistic or not. And you will see this on field after field. And of course, it is our obligation to follow up and to show people that they were fooling you. This is a fact. They don't do what they have told you in the elections.
Okay. Originally, we would have also discussed Sweden's security policy, as Sweden's was a neutral and non-allied country, and now is NATO. But it seems that this security issue is decided. It was not a big issue in the election, NATO membership.
No, it was not.
So the whole country thinks it is a good step. It is also... because people in Austria very often ask me, say, listen, you have to also see where Sweden lies on the map. The threat is different than when you, for example, for us in Austria. But at the end, because we spoke also about European policy a little bit, I think it is also to mention that the former Swedish Prime Minister, Stefan Löfven, announced that he will run for the presidency of the Party of European Socialists, and he will be the only candidate. So for sure, mid of October, we will elect him. I think it's a good signal, because he's a strong man, strong experience. And I think exactly what we discussed, how Social Democrats present a new idea of social security, not to widen the gap, but to bring the gap closer, and to be an alternative model for the populist movement on the right side, for the voters, let's say, to be a strong opponent for this, is important in Sweden, in Italy, in Austria, in France, everywhere. So I think he can contribute. Okay, so Sweden politics will be interesting still in the future, but we have to say, and maybe this is what I learned today, that it is the weird thing that Swedish Social Democratic even got stronger.
Yes.
But it's also still a stronghold, because it is in a lot of municipalities and provinces, and is a strong opposition.
Yes, we are, and as I also mentioned, that we are going to form governments on a regional and municipality level. So out of our perspective, we have a very positive momentum at this time. But at the same time, you have to be a little bit careful. I mean, you cannot say, well, that's how the future will be formed. It's up to us to decide. And speaking about Stefan Löfven's leadership, I think that all the social democratic parties, our destinies are related to each other. And if you grow in Austria, I think it will affect Sweden. Sweden will affect Germany, Holland and France and so on. So we have to do a double job. I mean, both on national level to make our analyses, our lessons, at the same time pushing our movement forward on a European level, because the right-wing nationalistic movement, they are also attacking our common continental projects, and this is a very important thing to note, that we have to also have a common agenda for Europe.
Exactly.
Which is related to the national projects.
This is, I think, is a good point, because it is also what reflects your biography. Yeah? Is working on the European level, but never forget also that you have to explain what you do, be in connection with also the local people. It's not only sitting in Brussels and doing also a good job here, but it's also important to sit in Sweden and to listen to the people and be there. And I think this is important. And at the end, this is also the stronghold of us social democrats, being connected and having an idea.
Yes.
Thank you, Ilan, for having us here, and thank you all for watching us. You know, it will be not only streamed online, you can also listen to it in our podcast, and I hope you enjoy it. If you have questions, put it in the comments, and if not, see you the next time for the next Melange. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Hej då.
Hej då.